Vanessa Price kept a small photograph in her wallet for 21 years. It was not a photograph of a child. She had no photograph of a child. It was a photograph of the ultrasound from the pregnancy she had lost, or believed she had lost, in 1999, when a doctor at a hospital in Memphis, Tennessee, had told her that the baby did not survive the emergency delivery at 28 weeks. She had been alone when they told her, 22 years old, in a hospital bed, no family in the room, the father of the baby gone 4 months before the delivery, and she had been handed paperwork and an explanation that she had been too young and too overwhelmed to fully question. She had kept the ultrasound photograph the way people keep the only image they have of something they loved and lost. She kept it in her wallet, not because she looked at it often, but because throwing it away had never been something she was willing to do. On an afternoon in August 2020, on the stage of Family Feud in Atlanta, Georgia, Steve Harvey looked at Vanessa Price and said, "Turn around." Vanessa turned around. Standing behind her was a 21-year-old young woman named Destiny, with Vanessa's eyes and the specific, unmistakable shape of Vanessa's jawline, and a birth certificate from a Memphis hospital dated March 3, 1999, the same day Vanessa had been told her baby did not survive. The baby had survived. She had been adopted. And for 21 years, two women had been living in the same city without knowing they were looking for each other. It was Tuesday, August 18, 2020, at the Trilith Studios complex in Atlanta. The Price family from Memphis, Tennessee, had driven to Atlanta in Vanessa's sister Rochelle's SUV. Vanessa, 43, Rochelle, 47, Rochelle's husband Devante, their teenage daughter Kyra, and Vanessa's closest friend Tanya, who had insisted on coming because she knew Vanessa and knew she should not take any kind of life-changing trip alone. Vanessa was a licensed practical nurse, 19 years in a pediatric ward at a Memphis hospital, which was either an extraordinary accident or an extraordinary inevitability, depending on how you understood such things. She was a small, precise woman, with the particular composure of someone who has learned to manage crisis in professional contexts so thoroughly that it has become her default register: calm first, process later, private always. She had raised no children of her own. She had told people, when asked, that it hadn't been the right time, and the right time had not arrived, and she had made her peace with it. She had not made her peace with it. She had simply learned to live alongside the absence, the way you live alongside a room you have stopped opening. But the real story hadn't even started yet. Vanessa Price had been 22 years old in November 1998, working a double shift at a convenience store, when she realized she was pregnant. The father, a man named Carl, who had left 2 months before the realization, was not contactable, and she had decided, in the way that people in impossible situations decide things, that she was going to handle it alone. She had handled it alone for 6 months. At 28 weeks in March 1999, she had collapsed at work. Placental abruption, emergency delivery, premature birth. She had been sedated for portions of it. When she was lucid, a doctor had told her the baby had not survived. She had been given paperwork. She had signed it. She had been 22, alone, sedated, and grieving, and she had signed what she was told to sign. What Vanessa did not know, what she had no way of knowing, was that the paperwork she had signed was not a death certificate. It was a voluntary relinquishment of parental rights, presented to her in a moment of maximum vulnerability by a hospital social worker who had been working in concert with an adoption agency to arrange an adoption for the infant, who had survived the premature birth, had spent 11 weeks in the NICU, and had been placed with an adoptive family in Memphis in May 1999, while Vanessa Price believed she was mourning. This was not legal. What had been done to Vanessa Price in that hospital room in March 1999 was not legal, and the discovery of it, 21 years later, by a Memphis investigative journalist following a tip from a former hospital employee, had set in motion a legal and human process that had eventually led, through a chain of 7 people and 3 legal filings, to the production team of Family Feud. Destiny Coleman was 21 years old. She was a junior at the University of Memphis, studying social work. She had been raised by her adoptive parents, loving, stable, both still living, who had disclosed the adoption when she was 12 and had known since age 16 that she wanted to find her biological mother. She had found, through the adoption agency's records, the name Vanessa Price and the Memphis hospital. She had found Vanessa's address through a public records search. She had written a letter. The letter had not been delivered. The address was outdated. She had found Vanessa's sister Rochelle on social media. She had sent a message. Rochelle had received it. Rochelle had not told Vanessa. Rochelle had instead called the Family Feud production tip line. The production team had spent 12 weeks verifying everything: the birth record, the adoption paperwork, the investigative journalist's documentation, the legal filings. They had connected Destiny with a family attorney funded by the Harvey Foundation's Legal Access Program. They had confirmed, through DNA testing arranged by the production, that Destiny Coleman and Vanessa Price were biological mother and daughter. Then they had called Rochelle and said, "It's time." Destiny was backstage. She had been backstage for 48 minutes, sitting with a production assistant who later said she had never held it together during a prep session, and she was not holding it together during this one. Destiny had been calm the whole time, the same composure as Vanessa. Same default register, calm first, process later. She was holding the birth certificate in both hands. Steve Harvey had been given the full file, including the documentation of the fraudulent relinquishment, 4 days before the taping. He had read it and gone very quiet. He had called his attorney from his car in the parking lot of the studio and said 3 things. Get the best family law person we have. Get them to Memphis. And make sure this woman has full legal representation before the end of next week. The reveal came at the end of the show. Steve walked to the center of the stage. He was quieter than usual, had been all afternoon, and the audience had noticed without quite naming it. The competing family, the Thompson family from Nashville, had also noticed. Their team captain, a 51-year-old woman named Carolyn Thompson, would later say, "You could tell he was carrying something." He kept looking at the curtain. "Vanessa," Steve said. His voice was careful, level. The voice of someone controlling something large. "I need to ask you about 1999. Vanessa Price went still. The precise, professional still of a woman whose body had just identified a piece of information as significant. "I know what they told you in that hospital room," Steve said. "I know what you signed, and I need you to know, before I say another word, that what they told you was not the truth." Vanessa Price looked at Steve Harvey for 1 full second. Then she looked at her sister Rochelle. Rochelle was crying. She had been crying since Steve's second sentence. "She survived," Steve said. His voice cracked on survived. He composed it. "Vanessa, she survived. She has been in Memphis. She went to the University of Memphis. She is 21 years old." He stopped. He pressed his handkerchief to his face for 3 seconds. When he looked back, his eyes were full. "And she would like you to turn around." Vanessa Price turned around. Destiny Coleman walked through the curtain. She was 21 years old, compact and precise in her movements, with Vanessa Price's eyes and Vanessa Price's jawline, and a birth certificate held in both hands, and the composed, calm, managing expression of a young woman who has been waiting for this for 5 years and has decided that when it finally comes, she is going to be present for every second of it. Vanessa Price made a sound. It was not a word. It was something before words. Something that came from a place in the body where 21 years of a particular grief had been stored, a sound that carried all of it in the moment of its release. Her sister Rochelle caught her before her knees fully gave. She did not fall. She steadied. And then she walked forward. And Destiny walked forward. And they met in the center of the Family Feud stage. And for a very long time, the only things that existed in that room were those two women holding each other. The studio fell completely silent. Not a performance of silence, the real kind. The kind that happens when everyone in a room understands simultaneously that they are witnessing something that does not have a frame. Steve Harvey knelt on the stage floor. The second time in his career he had done this. He knelt and pressed his handkerchief to his face and stayed there for a long time. And the production team did not say a word, and the cameras kept rolling. And the audience of 984 people, reduced capacity, pandemic protocols, 984 people who had come to watch a game show and had instead been given this. 984 people sat in the silence with him. When he stood, his voice was rough. This should not have happened, he said. What was done to this woman in 1999, the theft of 21 years, that should not have happened. And I want everyone watching to understand, this was not a mistake. This was a choice made by people who should be held accountable. He turned to the camera. My attorneys have been in contact with the relevant legal authorities in Memphis, Tennessee, since Tuesday. Vanessa Price will have the full support of the Harvey Foundation's legal team in any action she chooses to pursue, and she will not have to pay a cent of it. He made a call from the stage, his lead family law attorney in Tennessee. On speaker. He confirmed, publicly, the full legal support package. He then called a maternal advocacy organization based in Memphis and committed 3 years of grant funding toward their investigation of fraudulent adoption practices in Tennessee's historical medical records. He turned to the Thompson family. Carolyn Thompson was already shaking her head. Both families, she said. Steve nodded. Both families go home with the full prize today, because this woman has been waiting 21 years to meet her daughter. And I need her to leave this stage knowing she did not come here for nothing. The episode aired November 10, 2020. Within 24 hours, 100 million views. Within 2 months, 330 million. The hashtag #SheSurvived trended globally for 16 days, the longest trending hashtag in the show's history. The clip was referenced in a congressional hearing on adoption fraud in American medical history. It was discussed in 4 law review articles and 2 bioethics journals. The Tennessee State Legislature opened an investigation into historical adoption practices at 3 Memphis hospitals in January 2021, citing the case as one of several that had been flagged by the investigative journalist whose original tip had started the chain. 3 months after the taping, Vanessa Price had begun legal proceedings. 6 months after the taping, she had received a formal determination from the Tennessee State Medical Board regarding the 1999 hospital records. A year after the taping, she had reached a settlement, the terms of which she has not disclosed, with the parties responsible for what happened in that hospital room. Destiny Coleman transferred to a Memphis law school in the fall of 2021. She is studying family law. She has said in one interview that her focus will be adoption law and medical consent rights. She is expected to graduate in 2025. Her mother comes to every exam week with food. Vanessa Price still carries the ultrasound photograph in her wallet. She has not removed it. She has added one thing to it: a photograph of Destiny, taken on the Family Feud stage, in the moment just before they reached each other. The moment right before Destiny's face broke open. The moment that is the last second before 21 years of distance becomes zero. She carries both. She says she always will. The loss was real. The finding was real. Both of them are true, and both of them are hers. If this story about Vanessa's 21 years and the afternoon that told her the truth moved you, subscribe and hit the thumbs up button. Share this with someone who needs to know that the truth, no matter how long it takes to arrive, always arrives. Have you ever received news that changed everything you believed about your past? Tell us in the comments. Ring the notification bell for more stories that remind us what it means to finally be found.